Okay, thank you for the introduction. Today I'm presenting joint work with Monica Molino from Università di Torino and Luigi De Russis from Politecnico di Torino. And this presentation is also supported by the Cost Action Digital Mental Health for Young People. So the work takes us a tricky question: what is digital well-being, and more importantly, how can we move forward from talking about it to actually doing something about it? So let's be honest, most of us have been this person. Even during this conference, we should pay attention to a very interesting talk, but yet we are still scrolling. And over the last decade, we have seen a growing awareness that smartphones and social media can capture our attention in ways we don't fully control. And this concern has been talked about through the concept of digital well-being, which became popular through a Google initiative and entered our community back in 2019. But here's the thing, despite all this attention, we still don't have a shared understanding of what digital well-being actually means. On one side, we have very broad definitions like the impact of technology on living a good life. On the other, industry actors and researchers as well often frame it mainly as giving users tools to manage their own screen time. So this brings us to our two central questions. How is digital well-being understood in the CAI community, and how can it be turned into something concrete, something we can use for design and research? So to answer these questions, we followed a three-step approach. First, we grounded our work in a scoping review of 10 years of CAI publications that explicitly use the term digital well-being, 62 papers in total. And then we applied and refined our initial findings through 68 student projects from a university course on digital well-being. And finally, we consolidated everything into a layered taxonomy and a leverage points framework. So what did we find? Let's start with the basics. Out of 62 papers, only 8 explicitly define the term, and most of those rely on one of these two very broad definitions, including the one we have seen before. But in practice, even when citing these definitions, the field most often collapses everything down to screen time as the default way to measure digital well-being. Meanwhile, psychology has spent decades building rich models of well-being, but these rarely make it into digital well-being research at CAI. And the result is a concept that works more like a label than a real useful construct. And that's what motivated us to build a more structured account. So from our analysis, we identified 3 layers that shape how digital well-being is understood. The first one is about technology scope and users, basically what technology is being targeted and for whom. And unsurprisingly, smartphones and social media dominate, and young adults are the most studied population by far. But there are new technology scopes that are starting to emerge, both in the literature and in study projects, in students' projects. For example, generative AI is starting to appear as a source of a digital well-being concern, and this connects to recent work on dark patterns in generative AI systems, and there is an entire session on this topic later this morning here at CAI. 4 project groups focused on Gen AI in their projects. Here, for example, you see a prototype of a mobile application that encourages more critical and intentional use of AI for learning. The second layer of our taxonomy looks at mediators, so the mechanisms through which technology use actually affects well-being. And here, most of the contributions focus on mediators of the self, so things happening at the individual level. Screen time is by far the most discussed, but the field is starting to recognize that this is not enough, and other mediators, including sense of agency and attentional focus, are actually quite common. On the other side, social and environmental mediators are present but clearly underexplored. And among these social mediators, inclusion and accessibility is particularly interesting. Swartz and colleagues, for example, recently explored the intersection between web accessibility guidelines and digital well-being, showing that inclusive design can actually advance both agendas. And there was a very similar paper this year at CAI too. Doherty and Biega instead recently criticized the individualistic view of digital well-being, calling for it to be made explicit at every stage of the design process. These are still rare voices, but in my opinion, they point to where the field should needs to go. And the third layer captures how change is actually driven through interventions and strategies. Here, most of the works and student projects focuses on harm mitigation via self-regulation. So things like digital self-control tools account for the majority of contributions. Redesign, understanding harms, and co-regulation are also present, but in a minor proportion. And on the cultivation side, which is about proactively fostering positive experiences, not just fixing problems, we see positive design, education, and governance, although the numbers here are quite small. Education, for instance, is about building the knowledge and skills people need to navigate digital life, especially considering that we now live in a multi-device environment. And governance is slowly gaining ground too. Digital well-being is now entering regulatory discussions, mainly through the lens of dark patterns and deceptive designs. So now that we have laid out these three layers, let's bring them together. Based on our findings, we defined a leverage points frameworks for the digital well-being that situates interventions along a continuum of change. And the idea is quite simple. You take the three layers of our taxonomy, you combine them, and each combination defines a leverage point that can hit self-oriented, collective, or systemic orientations of change. And moving from self-oriented to systemic orientations, the potential leverage increases, but so does the difficulty of implementation. At the self-oriented start, we have traditional digital self-control tools like Apple Screen Time or Google Digital Wellbeing, which places responsibility entirely on individuals. Yet within each orientation, different degrees of impact can be achieved. At the self-oriented end, for example, we can place tools like Dedom, which is a mobile app prototyped by our students in the digital well-being course that helps young people counter compulsive social media use through gamified challenges. So while it starts from the individual, the group activities actually push it toward the collective orientation. Moving toward the collective orientation, this is a recent national project in which we developed a gamified educational platform to teach digital well-being in high school. So by distributing responsibility across the class and embedding new practices into teaching activities and routines, the impact becomes more durable and widely shared. And finally, at the systemic level, we can think about regulatory interventions such as the Digital Services Act. For example, European regulators recently identified misalignments between TikTok addictive design and the DSA, and Work at CAI this year has investigated the connection between dark patterns and such regulatory initiatives. These are the kind of interventions that address the structural conditions of digital life. They are probably hard to achieve, but they affect everyone. So to conclude, who is this framework for? We see three main audiences. So for researchers, it's a shared vocabulary, a way to position research work within the broader landscape, and maybe building bridges across fragmented traditions. For designers, it may serve as a tool for reflective practice to support the development of new interventions. And finally, for regulators, we see the framework as a tool to help diagnose whether current policies actually address the root causes of digital well-being challenges or whether they just shift responsibility onto users. A limitation of our work is that we look at our community only, but we intentionally conceive our framework as a living structure. So we invite the community to use and extend it. For that reason, we also created an interactive version of the framework. You will probably recognize our mutual friend Claude, who helped us develop it. So feel free to scan the QR code to explore the framework and propose new interventions and also elements in our taxonomy. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.